So let's get into it. Former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores is suing the NFL and multiple NFL teams in what I think is going to be a historic and landscape changing lawsuit that has to do with hiring practices and also really gets behind some of the dirty tactics and scheming that happens behind closed doors in NFL executive rooms. Now, Flores filed this lawsuit in Manhattan. It's in the 58-page brief for the lawsuit. He claims that Miami Dolphins owner Stephen Ross attempted to incentivize him to tank or purposefully lose games. This was back in 2019 during the days of everyone talking about the Miami Dolphins and how bad they were and how they were going to go 0-16 and how they should tank that season, and then also how people internally in the organization wanted them to tank. So apparently, it seems like Stephen Ross, owner of the Miami Dolphins, was one of these people because he allegedly offered Flores $100,000 for every loss that season. Flores says that as the team won games, general manager Chris Greer told him that Ross was mad that Flores was competing and was mad about the on-field success because it was, quote, compromising the team's draft position. Additionally, Flores alleges that Ross pressured him into recruiting prominent quarterbacks at the end of the 2019 season, which Flores refused so as not to violate the NFL rules for tampering. So again, you have the owner wanting to tamper, and then Flores apparently saying, no, we cannot do that. So that's one part of this lawsuit. There's another part of it that has to do with hiring processes, I should say, and that really gets into, I think, the crux of what this lawsuit is going to affect for years to come. Now, we all know about the NFL hiring process for head coaches and how it is skewed. And whether people want to believe it or not, it is 100% skewed. Because you have people like Brian Flores who get fired after starting 1-7 and then finishing out strong, finishing 9-8 with a winning record. You have people like Jim Caldwell, who, by the way, only coach to take the Lions to the playoffs twice in his tenure. I think he was the first coach to do it in like 40 years. Hasn't gotten a call from anyone for a head coaching job, apparently. That doesn't make sense. So you do see this trend of black head coaches being, for whatever reason, not engaged with enough, not getting the same opportunities as white head coaches with less of a resume, to be honest with you. And we'll talk about one of those coaches in just a second. So Flores also alleges that the Giants interviewed him last month for their head coaching vacancy for no other reason than to comply with the Rooney Rule, which requires teams to obviously interview a minority candidate for head coach. And Flores apparently spoke to the Giants on Zoom on January 18th. And apparently, not too long after that, he got a text from Bill Belichick where it said that New York had found their guy. And apparently, Belichick said, sorry, I meant to text Brian Daboll, not you. And Brian Daboll was apparently the guy, or was eventually the guy who was given the Giants head coaching job. So there's a lot more here. There's a story about the Broncos, and apparently John Elway showed up to this interview allegedly uninterested or hungover, or some reports say. I don't want to get into much into that, and the Broncos have refuted that story. But as far as Brian Flores and what he's alleging, and we need to understand this. Brian Flores is putting his career on the line here, and it is not an easy position to be in. It is not a position that anyone wants to be in, but I think it's a position that someone needed to take. And I think it's a position that someone with the record, with right now the buzz about him like Brian Flores, should take. Because it's the right thing to do. We have seen people like Josh McDaniels not do well in Denver, like just fizzle out in Denver, then go on and get an offer from the Colts in 2018, renege on that offer, come back to New England, and then land a head coaching job. This after a guy like Rick Bisaccia was basically the only thing that held that locker room together and ended up getting them to the playoffs. Then you have people like Vic Fangio, who never inspired anything in Denver, for being honest with you, who was getting head coaching interviews, serious head coaching consideration. Even right now, he's getting that. And that's not to say that people like Dable, that's not to say that people like Hackett, that's not to say those guys don't deserve their jobs. It's absolutely not to say that they are not worthy of being NFL head coaches. Dable, I especially think, is someone who is going to do well for the New York Giants. But it's not about that. It is about the fact that black head coaches get overlooked, or in the case of David Culley and Steve Wilkes, are hired to be fired. And look, there's a lot of people who are going to spin this. I promise you, the old mainstream media, they're going to pick this up. Fox News is going to pick this up and war on head coaches or some bull crap like that, because they're going to do. And then the other side's going to do the same thing, and that's not going to solve the problem. So if I were you guys, don't pay attention to any of that. What you should pay attention to is this lawsuit and how it is going to affect hiring practices. Because let's be honest, the Rooney Rule, for a time, it was, I don't want to necessarily say effective, because it didn't end up being too effective. It ended up in many ways tokenizing some of these head coaches. But it was a step in the right direction with, you could say, good intentions. But another step needs to be taken, and it doesn't necessarily need to be taken by any rule. I don't think there's a rule you can implement that will make people view other people in an equal light. I think that just needs to happen. And I think that happens with diversity, that happens with an understanding of what makes a good coach and what doesn't. And that comes with just being good at your job and hiring good people for your job, because there is no reason that any team out there should look at Brian Flores and not want him to be your top two or third, or your top two guy, one of your top two guys. Like, just off the bat, off of what he's done. Like, he is a serious head coaching candidate, and he honestly should be hired by now. I'm surprised he hasn't been. I'm surprised that Chicago didn't move harder for him, or haven't moved harder for him. I'm surprised that Denver didn't take a chance on him. Even though, I mean, you could say Denver probably wanted a more offensive-oriented guy. But this guy, what he did, he took a team like the Miami Dolphins, who weren't supposed to do crap in 2019, and then made them into a winner in just a year later, 10-6. Then they go 9-8. And look, when you start 1-7, it's very easy to lose your team. He didn't do that. They somehow got better. So there's going to be a lot of talk, and I will probably cover this more in depth and more throughout the next few weeks, months, years. But one thing I do know is that it's an important issue that needed to be spoken up for, and I'm glad that Brian Flores had the guts and had the will and the courage, honestly, to stand up for that. Thanks for watching this video from Real Take Sports Talk. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Also, remember to check out our live show every single Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on the YouTube channel. And remember, keep it real.